YouTube and Twitch as well. Oh, just hanging out, mate. Hanging out. Let's see if we can get some tunes happening, eh? Oh, yeah. A little bit of I'll stay. I'll stay here for a minute. Hang about. Talk about some things. I'll jet on out of here. So it looks like in certain parts of the country, especially around here, it's going to be pretty dry this summer. So I thought we could perhaps just go over some, groundwork kind of stuff leading up to getting stuff out there in the great outdoors. And then, of course, we'll get to some questions and stuff like that, depending on what questions you have today. Looks like I've got a nice halo on YouTube, which is pretty cool. Stoked about that. All right. And yes, happy Sunday to you too, Cause. All right. So yeah, prepping for dealing with a kind of hot, dry summer. The last couple of years have been kind of uncharacteristically cold in a lot of places and very, very wet. So yeah, it's been a sort of different kind of challenge to deal with. So both present, an element of issues, none of which are unsurmountable. And generally, you can make the most of a dry season, sometimes more than you can make the most of a wet season. So for instance, as long as you can kind of keep water up to things, yes, it's less than optimal, but it's a lot more optimal than if you're dealing with flogging rain for 2 to 3 weeks on end, and the subsequent losses to botrytis and bud rot and all that sort of stuff, root rot, all those kinds of things which are very difficult to deal with. Papa Bear, how you going, man? Nice to see you. Exactly, yeah. So you can add water, but you can't suck it up like a sponge, It's sort of and not everyone can have everything in a greenhouse. It's not practical for everybody, and it's certainly an expensive way of kind of going about it. And I suppose, as an aside to that, hotter, drier summers generally have a similar thing going on inside. Where you are running the air conditioner more, which dries out the air, and it's just generally drier. So you may find even in your flower room that you've got to add some humidity back to the air. But if you've been having to run a dehu as well as an air conditioner over the last couple of years, it's a lot cheaper to run a humidifier than it is a dehumidifier. So there is that. We've got S, and we've got Fogarts. And yeah, that's, and they tend to trap heat as well, Otto. So yeah, just keeping rain off stuff. Put it this way, I mean, it helps somewhat if things aren't getting flogged with rain, but if the relative humidity is like 95% and higher, it's, there's only so much you can do with airflow and all that sort of stuff. It's, generally down to how well that strain copes with how mold resistant it is at that point. I'll stop sharing the very strange sunglasses that I found on Tumblr. Yes, so yeah, you might have to add some humidity inside. Outside, it's generally about keeping water up to stuff. So firstly, you should prep kind of, roughly kind of figure out what you're going to need. Big plants are going to drink a lot. So if you're one of those people that's planting early, you should also, while you're at it, and it might seem really basic, but just figure out what you're going to do for water, because you're going to need a fair bit of it, and it's better to have it in surplus if possible. So figure that kind of stuff out, because that'll be a huge part of the success of trying to grow things outside. Otherwise, you can just opt to grow smaller plants, which are going to use less. But you can't have both. They're not cacti. You can't grow gigantic plants that don't use a lot of water. So yeah, prepping that. And then you look at things like water retention, right? So you're going to lose it due to evaporation, and also how well the moisture hold of that soil is, or whatever your ground that you're planting into, if you're planting in the ground. So clayier soils tend to hold more, and sandy ones tend to hold not very much at all. And then there's obviously an invariable spectrum in between, which you can alter. So you can dig things in to change the soil structure to add moisture retention. And you can, in some instances, not all, but in some instances, you can work clays and work things into them, such as gypsum and even some drainage material, and that will help. The ones that you can't do that with, that won't break up at all, you're best off using them as a subsoil and building up above them. So the most obvious one is to keep the ground covered. So, utilize a mulch. Or if you're one of those people that is dealing with numbers that are way too big to mulch, you can look at using a cover crop, bearing in mind that there's a trade-off there in terms of it's going to be also utilizing some of those nutrients and things that you have there for your other plants. G'day, Hunter Hayes, how you going? So a bit thicker of a mulch than you would have maybe gone in the wetter weather. So that's a good tongue tie, isn't it? Wetter weather. You're not so much looking at just trying to stop the surface of the soil from getting smashed. You're more trying to look at sort of holding moisture in there. So you don't want it so thick that your water isn't getting down into the soil. You don't want a foot of mulch, really, I don't think. But certainly a couple of inches or more. Like maybe 3 to 4 inches isn't out of the question, depending on the kind of mulching material. If it's something that kind of packs down, so for instance, alfalfa, coarse alfalfa, as it rots, tends to kind of compact a fair bit. You may want to apply that a bit thinner and then just top it up more often, rather than kind of creating a big biscuit of stuff that's hard to then water through. Whereas if you're using stuff that's more open, you can go a bit thicker with that stuff. There's a variety of things we do. I use the alpha mulch on a lot of stuff and then I've also been experimenting with rice hulls, kind of like them. They're okay. I've also got peanut shell, which I use for the gorilla soil, and I kind of really like that. That works quite well. But plenty of people use sugarcane, all sorts of straws and hay and things like that. Just pick something that's clean, not loaded with pests, and hasn't been grown with a ton of chemicals and things like that, and you'll be pretty good. Coco Garden. What are you doing, dude? So mulching, super obvious. And really you should be mulching in your soils anyway, makes them all better. But it's especially important when you are dealing with conditions where you've got a lot of dryback. It'll minimise that. Hey, we've got Aussie Autos too. If someone can confirm that we've got microphone and music this time, that'd be great too, because I never quite know on Instagram. I'm normally pretty sure that we have it on the YouTube. So somebody over there too. Yeah, there you go. Somebody watching on the YouTube. Could even be my dog. Other things you can look at. So you can look at incorporating. Seems a little quiet on Instagram. It's more if I've got the yeah, cool. There we go. All working. Sweet. So then you can look at, obviously you can look at digging stuff in that's going to hold more moisture, right? So stuff like compost, stuff like castings. There's different clays, so we use calcium bentonite in the soil. And that's kind of like the Cadillac of clays. So if you've got an especially sandy soil, you can dig some of that in, and it's helpful for making your sand a bit more loamy. So yeah, getting some in planting holes, digging some compost in. You can use the Gorilla Grow dirt that we have as a dig in, or dig a hole and fill the hole with planting or ground hole improver, whatever you want to call it, ground improver. And it, obviously it has peat. It has, the chunky coir. It's got compost and castings and the calcium bentonite and all sorts of things like that in there, which you're just digging all in one go. Or if you've got a lot of holes to do, then you can look at incorporate some compost. If you've got good compost you make yourself, or if you've got good castings you do yourself, it's a great season to maybe utilize those a little bit more. The unfunky UFO, yes. And yeah, if you're dealing with the sort of clayier sort of stuff, you've got to find a way to kind of either work the clay to the point where it's actually usable. So there's oftentimes where digging into that is just going to make a bucket that fills up with water. And so you've got drainage problems. It's not going to work well. Your plants need to breathe, and the water needs to get away. The contrast is that it's normally very mineral rich. So as a subsoil, it works out great. And it stores a lot of moisture, right? So it's kind of one of those situations where, yeah, you might want to utilize it that way. But as for digging into it, it's not always going to work. There's certain clays you can work with gypsum and they'll kind of open up a bit. They'll kind of form colloids and it'll ball up and you can do something with it. And then there's other ones that are just, they're going to stay that way. It's like plasticine. So you're better off going above that. So you can put containers on top of it. You can build beds in a rudimentary form. You can just make a mound of dirt on top of the soil. That's actually a fairly easy technique to do. Is you can buy geotextile fabric, and you can just build a mound and then wrap it in geotextile fabric, pin that together, and you've got a big old pot right there, kind of. Baby May, hey ITL, and yeah, talking trying to retain work with what's going to be potentially a pretty hot and dry summer in a lot of areas, dude. So if the soil is workable, then you can. Super intuitive, but if it's workable, you can work it. if it's like digging into a brick, you're probably advised to build up above that and just use it as a subsoil. How you going, sweet baby mate? But yeah, digging the stuff you can work, digging in some things that are going to hold more moisture throughout the season, and then subsequently top dressing with those, using castings, compost, things like that, top dressed and mulching, and combine them all, is all going to help with kind of, retaining what you put in. Watering efficiency is another good one to look at. So, if you can spring for it, systems that water slower, so drip irrigation, things like that, generally waste less and result in less vicious kind of dryback. Some days it's basically evaporating faster than you can get it out. So drippers, blue mats, if you're working with containers, sub-irrigated stuff, those are all good options because they're going to sort of keep pace with what's going on. It's not that you can't hand water correctly, it's just sometimes tough to size the container appropriately, and we're all pretty busy these days. So if it's a 45 degree plus day and you happen to be at work and you can't hand water that extra time through the day, you come home and look a little bit sad. It's not as optimal. So I suppose that's another thing, is, maybe size your containers a little bit larger. So you've got more reserve there. It's, if it's hot and super dry, it's pretty hard to try and do plants that are way outsized for the pot. A lack of pot will lead to lack of pot in this instance, right? Yeah. The Ohio Players. All right. Yes, a lack of pot leads to lack of pot more times than not. Maximum on the Seussisms today. Probably had just the right amount of coffee and missed just the right amount of sleep. All right, yeah, so you can dig stuff in, you can mulch, you can look at your watering efficiency, and then there is also stuff like, there's many different kinds, and we have a pretty cool one, but your mycorrhizal stuff. It helps extending that root system and making it more able to cope with drought. And even some of the compounds that these microbes produce help safeguard the plant and deal with excessive heat, excessive drought, all that sort of stuff. So they're another good thing to look at. They'll sort of make things more efficient and better able to cope. As an aside to that, I guess, is stress reduction. So stuff like seaweed, stuff like your aloe, things that are, it's an excessive amount of stress, and so you can't mitigate all the factors that cause the stress, but you can maybe help with the response to the stress. So those sort of things like in our range, the Green Supreme and Ocean Potion are pretty notable. And of course our mycorrhizal supplement is the dark matter, and we also have the antimatter, which is not mycorrhizal but is indeed some super funky, super cool microbes that just observantly seems to help with stress and drought and everything else. Let's get weird. We're already weird. Weird is where it's at. Alright, so I mean, what are your guys' kind of thoughts on that? I'm sure you have some. I normally do. I feel like listening to some Thundercat. And yeah, any other questions that you have, any other sort of garden stuff from throughout the week, while we funk around here for a little while longer. Just funking around for fun. Hazed and confused. How you doing? Maximum appreciation to the people who've bought some crop dusters. They're a really nice way to raise the humidity in this hot room with these damn lights in it. Yeah, it's all fresh in here now. Yeah, the aircon's the deal. Ozio, how you doing? Yeah, if you're indoors, you really need to look at your climate. If you're going to try and grow through summer, the LEDs help. They're not as hot and all that sort of stuff, but I mean, you really need to look at your climate control to try and really get much usable stuff out of it. Otherwise, it's a good time to maybe take a break, focus on some other stuff. If it's going to be like 45 degrees in your house and you can't either budget the hookup for HVAC for it, or can't leave the house one on because it's like a 6 kVA system, and with the cost of power these days it'll cost you $30 bajillion when you get your next bill. You open it and you're like, that's a lot of zeros. Why are there so many zeros? That's right, comfort. Those are comfort zeros. God damn it. comfort zeros are always where they get you. Crusty crops. I always think crusty demons whenever I see that. Just some dude like, you know, doing mad moto jumps. Planting stuff midair. Timothy? The most obvious is you're gonna need an air conditioner or something to Instagram stop because of Curtis. It's always Curtis. Oh, God damn it. Maybe? So here we go. It's always Curtis. Curtis always causes the end of it for some reason. Echo Baby May. Thanks for everyone for rejoining. I'm sorry. The funk got us cancelled again. Coco Garden, Krusty Crop, everybody, thank you for joining back on Instagram again. Sorry for the weird pause on YouTube. This is what it is. This is live, you know. They say don't do live with children or pets. Not sure where I lie on that field. Probably more of a pet. Colin, Philip, everybody, thank you. Appreciate it. People coming back. We've got a new filter now. How you doing? Yeah, so you'll need to sort out some sort of cooling, whether that's, if the humidity's low enough, you can get away with evaporative cooling in a lot of spots, especially your veg rooms, and they add humidity. So I think there's a brand called Redback, something like that. But yeah, those sorts of coolers, for a human, they're kind of like, oh, this just feels like cool, wet breeze. But to a plant, that's kind of nice. And, you know, if you've got 15% humidity, like some places get to, desert conditions, you can sometimes get away with them in flowering areas. It's a bit more rare, but yeah, that'll work in some spots. And then obviously just looking at some sort of active cooling. So there's the portable ones. They're not terribly efficient because they kind of take air from the room they're cooling to cool the part that's normally outside the window. So that's the why they're not as efficient as, say, a window rattler, or, you know, certainly not as efficient as a split one, a splitty, the old splitty. And in Australia we don't have the mini splits that you can just hook up yourself. You need a dude for that, or a person, a HVAC aficionado. That's right. That's the title. They'll come around and aficionad one into your wall for you. Most people have those automatically installed in their house, and depending on how intelligent yours is and where your stuff's located, you might be able to utilize that to cool your spot. That'll work. Testify. There we go. Cool. And yeah, looking at some kind of humidifier in the tents. There's heaps of different ones available now. But something to just put some water into the air, because particularly in veg, they're not going to grow real strong and look real nice if they're dealing with under 50%, certainly under 40% humidity. And it's pretty simple and cheap to add it. The most expensive part about it is actually getting the humidifier. Some people build ones that do their whole room. I would urge you to look at the Mushroom Growers forums for some good tips on building those, because those guys seem to have really mastered them. But there's options. There's, of course, AC, Infinity, various different ones. eBay, run the risk of something that maybe catches fire, but you know, maybe a bit cheaper. Aussie Autos, thanks for coming back. They kick me off again because I like to listen to Curtis Mayfield. That's fine. Yeah, dehumidifiers are not cheap anymore, and well, they never really were. But the ones they sell now seem to be a lot crappier than what you used to be able to buy. The old DeLonghi ones that were a compressor type worked really well. I think they were the Climber or something like that. Anyway, yeah, doesn't matter. You can't buy them anymore. There's a lot of desiccant style ones that are around there, and they're not really great. You want a compressor type. Yeah, you must. All the doggos have to be, because dogs are the best people. So you have to stop and acknowledge dogs. It's the way it is. I'll never be on your case about that. It always makes me sad when the dog doesn't want to be acknowledged. You're like, oh. But yeah, inside it's just kind of more about how much you've got to invest, how efficient that ends up working out. Obviously, if your place isn't terribly well insulated, or your climate control isn't gonna, it's gonna have to be doing a lot of work. So just kind of do the math on that, figure it out. Might be cheaper just to chuck a couple in the yard. Just chuck them in the yard. Focus on that. And then move back into the other area when conditions are favourable. Plus, you know, outdoors can be a lot of fun. It's a lot of people travel from all around the world to come and see our climate. We've got a great big huge hole in the ozone layer above us, pumping out enormous amounts of UV. So you can utilise that to your advantage and grow some stonking, awesome, funky plants. Or you could not. You know. Then the sun wins. Do you want that? Do you want the sun to win? I say stick it to the sun and go, I'm putting plant there. Screw you. You're helping me now. I might have to wear zinc, but you know. I agree, Papa Bear. And it's a different thing too. I don't think it's one or the other. Do both. I'm just saying sometimes it's not efficient for certain people.
She's here, Mr. Johnson.
The funky worm. Useless music trivia of the day. Useless funk trivia, whatever the hell ever. Anytime you ever hear like that, like that kind of whistling synthesizer thing in the back of a Dr. Dre song, or a lot of 90s hip hop, but it's so common now. It all basically originates from The Funky Worm, which is an Ohio Players song from the 70s. He's about a funky worm that lives in the ground 6 feet down. Completely useless music trivia. Almost every 90s Dre song, I guess. Yeah. Certain places in Australia you can just pretty much go outside all you can grow outside pretty much year round. But you know, not everywhere. On the East Coast, you know, sort of particularly on where we're located, it's definitely seasonal. So yeah, we talked about autos last time. I guess this would be more prepping for maybe for your autos, but probably more for your big photo period, like full termers, the head stash stuff. San Andreas fire. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I have, but that's one of my little hobbies is when I really like an album, I'll go and research all the technology and things that they used at the time to make it, because as it, like, you can find out who played on it, and normally they have a style, so it doesn't matter where you listen to them, you hear that. But there's certain times where certain pieces of equipment or certain whatever it is comes about, and then there's all these things that just kind of come out of that, and I find that endlessly fascinating. Not that you guys tune in here for that, but anyway. Or I can't really say that one. If it's multiple people, maybe it is. Or I'm just going to go Auto and then Viso and the Don of Cron. I know how to say that one. He's a regular tuner-innerer listener. Yeah. And that's... I don't know what's going on. There we go. Bootsy Collins will work. I got a pair of sunglasses through the week for $6. Hell yeah. Now, whenever I play bass guitar, I can, I'm like 1.5% better because I have them.
You inspire me to poetry. So listen while I recite naughty nothing.
So yeah, well, I know there's some people that are already putting stuff in for their outdoor. Be interesting to know what some people are planning on planting. With the tongue ties today. Planning on planting. Plantastic.
Oh, can I make sweet love to you, baby? What I'd like to do would be good to you. And if you hang up on me now, I'll be feeling. I'm just living and I love it.
Some people have been asking me about when Light Soil will be back. Yeah, kind of got a little bit behind on that one. But some batches of it will be ready about the start of next week. Not this week coming, the week after.
According to the way you make me
Let's say a week Monday. That works better.
guess you'd call me an obscene phone call.
And we're moving into the new style label with them soon. So it'll be the same soil you've been buying, but with a cooler label. We've been sort of updating some of them.
Oh, you're the sweetest fantasy I know.
Canberra Crops. What's going on? You're definitely one that I know is doing some outdoor stuff. You had a year last year. I'm hoping that we can't one-up it this year. Get something that could be seen from outer space. NASA's like, we're getting reports of a giant green monster somewhere in the ACT. Everyone run for your lives. We must harness the powers of Godzilla. And they turn up and it's just you, 1 yardie, taking up 3 yards. Sport for Choice is a good place to be. I think it's a bit like that these days because there's so many varieties. Yeah, swinging from the trees, jungle vines in them. Doing George of the Jungle between them, chucking amendments around. Yeah, so many varieties in so little time. It's definitely one of those, like, I don't think you could ever... There was a time where I thought you could maybe collect it all. Like, you could feasibly collect all the Pokemon. But these days, like, I don't know, man. There's a lot of stuff out there. And, I guess a lot of it boils down to various groups, and then there's little subgroups within a group. And you can kind of mine that for whatever stuff it is you like, which is the really cool thing about today's day and age, is that instead of, which is probably philosophically better, and instead of having like a massive conglomerate, you tend to have like a lot of smaller stuff all going on, and then that results in an almost fractal amount of variety of different things. Because, no two people think alike, right? So, yeah, that definitely seems to be a thing with strain hunting or varieties, bean collecting for a lot of people. I call it SAS, seed acquisition syndrome. Just got to keep getting them. But yeah, I don't think you could ever get to the end of it now. I think you, even if you picked like I want to collect all the blue ones, you'd be going to collect all the blue ones because there's so many new ones being created all the time that I don't know that you'd get there. And a lot of things are a single-only production, so they're produced once and then not produced again in the same, either in the same form. So, I mean, if it's an F3 and what you really liked was an F2, it's not technically going to be the same. So yeah, difficult one that. I think that's been said before. That it's one of the, I mean, it's certainly capable of the widest amount of genetic expression that I've seen in plant groups. But at the same time, if you look at an orchid, for instance, and the whole group and all the little subgenres that make up orchid, there's an incredible amount of diversity in there. Like if you look at the difference between a dendrobium and a stanhopea, you know, or a ground-dwelling terrestrial greenhood versus even like an Australian rock orchid, like they look alien to each other. So yeah, we even found these ones one year that look like little eyeballs. Can't think of the name of them right now, but they're like, you know, that's something from outer space, basically. But yeah, this particular plant we're dealing with has an incredible amount of diversity in it. And I think the more people's hands that it goes through, it tends to make that even more diverse, right? The Donofcron there going for some of the Appalachian stuff. Cool. I haven't really spent too much time up in Appalachia, or none at all, actually. None. I like that show, Moonshiners. It fit. Yeah, that's the thing. You can. That's a good way of putting it. You don't have the national Pokedex anymore, just regional Pokedexes. Yeah. At a certain point, it becomes just way too vast, and there's overlap too. I mean, there's overlap in a good way. You know, someone might have a version of something that you really like that's similar but has like a slight edge to it, and everybody else is like, nah, I prefer this other one, but you really like that one. That's some of the cool stuff that's kind of around Wizard of Oz and Xenetics. Go with what you like. And normally, whenever things go one way, it always swings back the other way pretty quickly. So, you know, if it's if everyone's into fruit, it'll go to whatever the opposite of fruit is, probably like roadkill stuff again. And then, you know, when that comes back in again, then people will be back into, I don't know, sour stuff. And yeah. There's some people that make that their whole thing. They just pick one little area, and that's just their... They don't try and do everything. They just try and do that one thing really well. That kind of samurai approach to stuff I really like. The jack of all trades way is also fun. Otto's back. Thanks, dude. Yeah, they kicked me off before for listening to Curtis. They don't care about Parliament, though. With the world. How will they ever get things right if they do not recognise Parliament? I don't even know. Alright, I know what song I want to close out today with. Be interesting to see in about a month what people start pulling out of the Pokedex to put in. What the chosen children are. we were talking about trying to deal with warmer, hotter, drier summer conditions, and now it's just devolved into a back and forth, a live back and forth between the comments. If you're wondering where we're up to, Zenetics, we're at that end of it. At the end of the part where it all devolves, and then it dissolves. And I see if I'm allowed to repost it or not. Sometimes it'll let me, sometimes it won't. There's been some really cool blues getting around lately. I think Easty Treats one's a really good one, but yeah, there's been some other ones as well. It's nice to see DJ stuff getting around. Various different forms of it. I'm hoping someone out there's got some of his Brutus Steve stuff. The stuff he did with Brutus Steve. Starts trying to like, popularise that again, because there was some really unique things in that. Alright, we're going to go with Breakwater, Release the Beast, for the closeout, because I love this one. It's so sick. Alright. This is where Daft Punk got it from. Yeah, I agree, Zenetics. We are in for a pretty crazy summer here on the East Coast, I think. It's been hot already, and it's been just, it almost, whatever green we had evaporated as soon as that bright sunshine came out. And so, yeah, if it's like that this early on, then, you know, unless it really turns around and we start getting some rain and it turns tropical, I think it's going to be one of those years where it's hot and dry as hell, and then we get pelted with ridiculous storms, and there's lightning and stuff with virtually no rain in it. Basically a high anxiety season. So, you know, practice your meditation, maybe do some yoga. L-theanine helps. I don't know. Green tea extract. Just try and find some chill, basically. Marshall Young, nice to see you, bro. Man's a Gallus. And yeah, where you are, it is definitely always hot and dry. But still, I mean, you guys have the calcium bentonite comes out of over there, so you can use that a lot more than what a lot of other people can. Yeah. Yeah, man. I'm going to head. Thanks very much, people. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next Dirty Talk. Peace.